Hello， 各位同學大家好啊！相信你哋咧已經考晒你哋學校嘅考試啦。咁但係今年讀緊中五嘅同學仔咧就千祈唔好放鬆擺爛喎，因為我哋嚟緊咧2027年嘅 DSE listening 咧開考唔夠300日嘅咋，係黃金備考期嚟㗎，所以1分鐘都唔應該浪費。有見及此，我哋今日咧就特登為大家製作咗一個超長嘅雙篇同主題新聞合集，而主題咧就係政府網約車發牌嘅諮詢類新聞。所以今集入邊咧就有大量嘅配額數字啦、政府部門啦、法定資格啦，同埋市民業界雙方嘅觀點，全部咧都值得大家去學習下㗎。咁你準備好未咧？準備好，我哋馬上去學下啲 core vocab 先啦。
Ride-hailing service 網約車服務 Initial phase 首階段初期 Due diligence 盡職審查 Traffic conviction 交通定罪記錄 Third party insurance 第三者保險 Level the playing field 打造公平競爭環境 Inevitable 不可避免的 Cap 上限設限livelihood 生計 ratchet up fares 提高票價 consultations 諮詢 service reliability 服務可靠性 supply shock 供應衝擊 occupancy rate 佔有率入住率乘搭率 quarterly 季度 peak times 尖峰時段。
好 ，core vocab 學完啦，我哋馬上去第一條片。
The government is consulting the public on the number of licenses for ride-hailing services this week. It is considering issuing at least 10,000 licenses in the initial phase, with a likely cap of 15,000.
Following the enactment of the primary legislation for ride-hailing platforms last year, the Transport and Logistics Bureau is submitting a document to the Legislative Council regarding the licensing scale. The government will start with at least 10,000 licenses during the initial phase of regulating ride-hailing platforms. The number may be capped at 15,000. So what do residents think?
我覺得應該要放寬咯，唔係規。
This man argued that the government should not have too much control, noting that ride-hailing services are an inevitable global trend. Meanwhile, this woman expressed concern that capping the number of licenses could negatively impact commuters who might not be able to secure a ride during busy holiday periods. The Legislative Council passed the primary framework last October, under which separate licenses are required for platforms, drivers, and vehicles. Platforms holding ride-hailing service licenses must be registered in Hong Kong and conduct due diligence on their drivers and vehicles. Drivers must be at least 21 years old with no serious traffic convictions in the past 5 years, while vehicles should be less than 12 years old and undergo annual inspections and carry third-party insurance. To many taxi drivers, the quota for licenses may directly affect their livelihoods.
Ng
Quan Singh, permanent president of the Taxi Dealers and Owners Association, pointed out that 5 major taxi fleets already offer e-hailing, but face high operational costs, including new cars under 3 years old, inspection twice a year, and expensive insurance. He urged the government to level the playing field to ensure cab and ride-hailing drivers are treated identically. The panel on transport has scheduled a meeting this Tuesday, when the licensing issue will be put on the table.
咁第一條片咧，我哋就聽完啦。咁我就唔去播咧綠袖子啦，去折磨你哋嘅耳仔啦。相信你都聽咗好多次啦。咁想休息下嘅同學仔咧，可以 pause 咗呢條片幾分鐘，清一清自己嘅腦袋咧，先至繼續去聽第二條片嘅。咁但係有信心嘅同學，梗係事不宜遲，馬上去片啦。
Ride-hailing platform Uber says introducing a cap on the number of licenses for their drivers could ratchet up fares by some 70% and double passengers' waiting times. On the other hand, the local taxi trade urges the government to consider the cabby's livelihood. While the government's consultations over the cap on ride-hailing license numbers continue, earlier proposed limit was set between 10,000 and 15,000. Uber says if the cap is set at 15,000, the number of active drivers on the platform would immediately be halved from the current 30,000, significantly impacting service reliability. For instance, for journeys from Hong Kong Disneyland to Wan Chai, the fares during peak periods could rise from $250 to $430.
Moving too quickly on a tight limit could cause a major supply shock to riders. When you limit the number of cars, wait times naturally go up. Our numbers show that during busy hours, wait times could double. Fares could also rise by as much as 70% at peak times. This would change the convenient, high-quality service that Hong Kong relies on every day.
So how many licenses will be enough?
The cap isn't for Uber to set, so we are not sat here today telling the government how many licenses to issue. Our request is to take into account the real-world demand and level of service that people provide right now. It is very unusual, even in the first place, to have a cap on the quota of number of licenses. You know, that is incredibly unusual.
Uber also suggested that the government review the number of licenses on a quarterly or at least half-yearly basis to ensure supply keeps pace with market demand. The taxi trade, meanwhile, says taxis on the road currently have an average occupancy rate of just around 30%. They say the number of ride-hailing licenses should range between 3,500 and 3,800.
攞咗牌照，佢哋一定會有成本嘅。
An industry representative notes after the licensing mandate takes effect, fewer ride-hailing drivers will work part-time as it costs more to acquire the licenses, so it won't affect fares as much. He also calls on the government to consider cabbies' livelihood and assist industry tech upgrades over the long term.
好啦，真係要俾個讚你啊嚇！我哋堅持咗咧，聽咗2條咧都幾長嘅 listening news clip 㗎。咁喺 listening 嘅 part A 最尾嗰個 task 嗰陣時咧，好多時咧老師咧都要求就係同學仔咧去寫啲比較長嘅句子㗎。咁記住啦，喺寫長句子嘅時候咧，你聽嗰陣時咧，其實盡量都可以用翻啲簡寫啊，唔需要真係成個句子寫晒落嚟㗎。抄低啲重點咧，之後咧再俾你復卷嘅時間咧，再去加翻一啲 missing 嘅重點咧，就可以咧事半功倍啦。好，離我哋嘅 DSE 開考咧，真係唔夠300日㗎啦，所以咧我哋一齊努力，一齊等住 Sammy 陪你 DSE listening 齊齊練。